everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Danmachi Shinigami, Chapter 137 to 150, Chapter 137. Hermes 1277 words following behind Fells, Rayleigh arrived at a secret room, also underground. At this moment, there were already 4 people seated here. More accurately 1 god and 3 mortals. "Ah, young man, hello there," the god sitting on the sofa said. Rayleigh glanced over the people in the room. Although he was not looking at Fells, his words were clearly directed at him. "So you made these arrangements on the assumption that I would accept the commission." There was no emotion in his tone, and that, precisely, was how he showed displeasure. Having others casually guess at your thoughts and predict your actions was always an unpleasant experience. "Please calm yourself, Lord Yodasai. We simply felt that your strength made you the most suitable person for this commission." By praising Rayleigh like that, Fells was taking the initiative to lower his stance, clearly not wanting to provoke him. Just as he had said, they acknowledged Rayleigh's strength, so they did not want to leave him with a bad impression. "The guild will cover the intelligence fee in full. You may ask the Hermes Familia anything you like." Rayleigh raised a brow. It was not that he could not afford the intelligence fee himself, but for the guild, this was indeed a rather generous gesture. Sitting on the other 2 single sofas were Asfi and another woman, while a beast woman girl stood nearby. If he remembered correctly, she should be Lillian Louis. Rayleigh sat down across from Hermes. "Now then. As for the Rakia Kingdom, we've already done a very thorough investigation," Hermes said confidently. His eyes were shining as he stared straight at Rayleigh, making Rayleigh feel somewhat uncomfortable. "Then first of all the map." Before thinking about anything else, Rayleigh first thought of the key to this mission, that was to unlock the map. The Rakia Kingdom was unexplored territory, a completely unfamiliar region to him. Since it was a kingdom-type familia, the royal capital would definitely be divided into districts, just like Ororio. The difference was that a kingdom had a class system and a noble system at that. There would definitely be areas ordinary people were not allowed to enter. Of course, the map, right. Naturally, we've already prepared it." Hermes smiled and snapped his fingers. Behind him, Lillian Louis immediately took out a rolled-up map and handed it to Rayleigh. When Rayleigh took the map, he felt that the beast woman girl in front of him was very stiff. She even seemed to be trembling slightly. "What's wrong with her? Is she sick?" "Didn't seem like it." Rayleigh looked at her face. This time, the girl very obviously showed a panicked expression and immediately turned her face away. All right then, that confirmed it. This girl seemed to be afraid of him. Rayleigh found it rather baffling. He unfolded the map and held it before his eyes, his gaze sweeping over it 2 or 3 times. Then he closed his eyes and replayed every detail of the map in his mind. He found that it was as clear as if he were looking at the actual object, without the slightest vague part. Jif blessings a minor that skill gave him a form of perfect memory. With only 2 passes of his eyes, he had already memorized all 735 marked locations named on this map. He could even directly construct a 3-dimensional model of the royal capital in his mind. After confirming that he had completely memorized the contents of the map, Rayleigh casually summoned a ball of flame, and, in the blink of an eye, burned the map in his hand until not even ash remained. Hermes understood. Rayleigh would not do meaningless things, which meant that in just those 2 or 3 seconds, the contents of that map had already been completely memorized. How impressive! Not only his smithing skill and martial ability, his intelligence was extraordinary as well. Hermes lowered the brim of his hat, hiding his expression, especially his eyes. Otherwise, that look of someone who had discovered a new toy might frighten the others. Not that he minded being disliked, but if it could be avoided, all the better. This is the list of all subordinate gods in the kingdom besides the Ares Familia. And this one is the list of the kingdom's nobility. And this one is the list of individuals inside the Rakia kingdom, who require special attention. As Hermes spoke, Asfi took out the corresponding documents one after another and placed them on the table. That was why having an excellent subordinate was so important. Not only were they useful, they could also help you put on a show. Rayleigh felt a bit emotional. He picked up the 3 lists, memorized all of them, and then burned them as well. And lastly, this. Hermes suddenly took out a bottle filled with liquid. He said, "This is a concealment potion." A puzzled look appeared on Rayleigh's face. He had heard of unlock potions and update potions before, but a concealment potion was truly something he had never heard of. Still, even by instinct, he could tell this was definitely contraband. An unlock potion was a potion that could ignore a person's will and peek at their hidden status. As long as the potion was poured onto someone's back, it could unlock the hidden status and reveal the person's familia, ability values, magic, skills, and so on. This kind of potion was prohibited from circulation in Ora Rio, but if it was merely manufactured and no one knew, then there was no problem. Then there was the update potion. This was a potion that could update a person's status without needing their patron god. The price of a single bottle was enough to make even a core-class adventurer burst into tears. Its raw materials were extremely mysterious. Even before update potions were banned, the materials themselves had already involved severe contraband. And now there was this concealment potion. Rayleigh was hearing of it for the first time. Hermes explained at the right moment, "This potion can hide the status on your back, helping you disguise yourself as an ordinary person. The Rakia kingdom checks the identity of those entering the city, especially whether they bear a fauna or not. If your identity as a member of the Hephaestus familia is exposed, it will immediately cause an uproar. But with this kind of potion, it can be hidden." At that point, Hermes' gaze suddenly changed. It became sharp and shrewd. "But be careful. At most, it only hides your status. A true expert can judge a person's strength from the way they walk, their expression, their bearing, even their breathing. So you still need to be careful." Seeing how seriously Hermes was warning him, Rayleigh almost felt a little flattered. This kind of treatment should have belonged to a certain rabbit, shouldn't it? Why was Hermes paying this much attention to him? Could it be that this trickster god had taken an interest in him? That was definitely not a good thing. "I've prepared several false identities for you to choose from. You decide." Hermes took out a set of cards. Then he selected 5 from among them. He placed the 5 cards in a row across the tea table. Rayleigh lowered his head and looked. Each of the 5 cards had a different design, and a word written on it. The first card, Apprentice Smith from the school district. The second, Wandering Mercenary. The third, Bard. The fourth, Painter. The fifth, Musician. Rayleigh looked at the 5 cards, hesitated for less than a second, then made his choice. "I want all of them." Chapter 138, Chapter 138, Shirkan 1207 words, all of them. Hermes froze, then quickly added, "And no, how could someone possibly have that many identities at once?" Rayleigh picked up the 5 cards and held them before his eyes, studying them carefully while asking back. He used one card to cover his left eye and looked straight at Hermes with the other. Even the most ordinary person, if you pick out all the high points of his life, would still seem dramatic and full of twists. If that's the case, then a more layered background is more fitting for a wanderer, don't you think, Lord Hermes? Hermes was at a loss for words. A wandering mercenary who had also learned smithing, while also making a living as a bard, and for a bard to understand music and painting also sounded reasonable enough. "Why can't I be a merchant?" Rayleigh put down the cards and voiced a doubt he had been wondering about. After all, in stories like these, the protagonist always disguised himself as a merchant. It had practically become an unspoken convention of another world. He had originally thought he might get to experience pretending to be a merchant for once, so somehow, that made him a little disappointed. Hearing the question, Hermes explained, "That won't work. The Rakia kingdom manages merchants and caravans very strictly, and even if they leave for just 10 seconds, when they return they still have to go through inspection. Besides, the movement of goods was too slow, and Rayleigh did not have time to wait. In addition, we'll also send one person to assist you, Hermes suddenly said. Then he pushed the beast woman girl behind him forward and introduced her. This is an outstanding intelligence operative from my familia Lillian Louis. Assist me. Rayleigh looked at the beast woman girl, who still did not dare meet his eyes, with a little surprised. Hermes said, I can guarantee Lillian's ability. She'll absolutely be able to help you. Once you enter the royal capital, if there's any information you want investigated, you can leave it to her. Seeing the self-satisfied look on his face, Rayleigh understood. This girl really did have something special, otherwise Hermes would not be acting this smug. Just then, the woman seated to the side, Lilith, gave a light cough. After it drew Rayleigh's attention, she pretended it had not been deliberate and maintained an elegant posture. Then that settles it. After the matter had been settled, Hermes left with the members of his familia. As they brushed past each other, Rayleigh suddenly felt something being slipped into his palm. Half an hour later. Following the address written on the note in his hand, Rayleigh found a discreet inn, and according to the room number written on it, found the well-prepared Lilith. Even after 8 rounds with Lilith, Rayleigh still showed no sign of exhaustion, so in the end, Lilith could only surrender. Seems like Hermes have taken a liking to you. Rayleigh was shocked on the spot. No need to worry. That's not what I mean. And besides, even if it were, I'd protect you. Lilith pressed a finger lightly to Rayleigh's lips, said it with a teasing smile. Then she reached into the deep valley of her chest, and pulled out a small note between 2 fingers. When Rayleigh took it, a faint trace of warmth still lingered on the paper. Written on it was an address that Rayleigh instantly recognized. It was a certain shop in the red light district of the Rakia kingdom. This is a helper. Absolutely reliable. Lilith clung to Rayleigh like a sloth, then murmured, if there's something even Lillian can't handle, go find this person. Rayleigh understood. This was probably an internal hidden asset used by the Hermes familia, an important backup that Hermes had not intended to activate for his sake. But with Lilith's help, Hermes was destined to miscalculate. Thank you, Rayleigh said sincerely. But Lilith said with dissatisfaction, I want thanks that are more direct. You've already recovered? Not yet, so you should show a little restraint. Impossible. Because you don't actually want any restraint at all. After night fell, Rayleigh returned home and told Althea about the rescue commission that had come from the Rakia kingdom. In truth, if Althea were willing to act, then within 3 days the Rakia kingdom would be flattened, as the power of the silent Althea was enough to destroy a small kingdom with ease. Do you need my help? Althea asked. Rayleigh smiled slightly. If he really said yes, then she probably really would help him, but he still refused. You should still avoid strenuous activity as much as possible. It's not good for your body. Although the sparring between the two of them had been carried out seriously, for Althea it was only at the level of a brisk walk. It did not even reach the standard of battle. A real battle would place a burden on the current Althea. After hearing Rayleigh's answer, Althea fell silent. After a while, she spoke again. How long before you come back? Rayleigh was a little surprised when he heard her ask that. Before, when he left, she had never asked something like this. Did that mean some kind of change? I'll come back as soon as I can. After saying that, Rayleigh suddenly felt a strange sense of familiarity. It felt just like something a husband would say to his wife before going out. This time, I'll be gone a little longer, so just using tags won't be enough. That's why I'm going to forge a batch of special Zanpakuto. Like what you made during the war before. You mean Tensiga? No, it's not quite the same, Rayleigh explained. Tensiga had been a failed product. That kind of blade had only been something for emergency use, and to him, it was a humiliation. After working through the night, Rayleigh forged 7 small swords about 40 centimeters long. These swords looked like syringes. As long as the hilt was twisted, the blade would split open, and a blade of spirit particles would condense in the open section. Seeing that the result matched his expectations, Rayleigh nodded in satisfaction, then gave them both a name and a power. After another day had passed, he placed the 7 syringe-like small swords into a box and handed them to Althea. These are Zanpakuto too. Althea looked at the small swords inside the box with some confusion. Because of exhaustion, Rayleigh's mental energy was somewhat weakened, and he could only barely force out a smile. They are Zanpakuto, that's right. I named them Shirkan. They're healing-type Zanpakuto that absorb magic power and convert that magic power into Kaido. Healing type. That's right. Rayleigh gently stroked the body of one Shirkan, and the blade immediately split into 2 halves, extending a needle formed from spirit particles. Like this, insert the spirit particle blade into the body, then pour in magic power. The power of Kaido will enter the soul through the spirit particle blade. If you start feeling unwell, use them and absolutely do not push yourself. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya Translator. Chapter 139, Chapter 139, Infiltration 1401 Words I understand. Althea put the Shirkan back into the box and carried it up to the attic. Before going up the stairs, she turned back and spoke in a low voice, "Don't make me wait too long." Although her voice was very soft, Rayleigh heard it clearly. It was not easy for someone as indifferent as her to say something like that. "I'll go and come back quickly." Early the next morning, Rayleigh arrived at the station inside the city and boarded a carriage. Most of the people in the carriage were traveling merchants or people who had come to Ororio to visit family. There were 8 people in the carriage. Including Rayleigh, there were 3 men. The other 5 were all women. The carriage left Ororio. The women in the carriage began chatting, and before long they were laughing and smiling, becoming familiar with one another. Perhaps because their circumstances were similar, they had many common topics. Most of their conversation revolved around family. Rayleigh turned his head and looked at Ororio gradually growing smaller in the distance, and inwardly sighed, feeling as though he had returned to the time when he had first arrived in Ororio. Back then, he had been overwhelmed by the grandeur and magnificence of that city, and his emotions had been unbelievably excited. But now, what he felt was the attachment and reluctance of leaving home. Especially after going through the great feud. His sense of belonging toward Ororio had grown much stronger. After the carriage had traveled for a while, Ororio could no longer be seen even if he looked back. Rayleigh took out a drawing board from his luggage, clipped a sheet of paper onto it, and began sketching lines across the page. A young man dressed like a merchant beside him saw what he was doing and asked curiously, "Are you a painter?" Rayleigh turned his head and smiled slightly at him, then raised the drawing board in his hand and showed the chaotic lines to the other man. "Oh, so you're an apprentice." "Something like that." Rayleigh casually chatted with the people in the carriage, but the movements of his hands never stopped. 2 hours later, he was already able to accurately outline the contours of objects. By evening, many sketched objects had appeared on his paper: apples, combs, bottles, rings, and the like. The carriage stopped by the roadside, leaning against a large tree. The horses also took the chance to rest and began eating the wild grass by the road. The driver took out a large pot, stacked a simple stone stove, and began trying to light a fire. But the grass was somewhat damp, making it hard to get the fire going. Seeing that, Rayleigh said to the driver, "Leave the fire to me. You can unload the ingredients." "Oh, all right." The driver handed the firestone to Rayleigh, looking as though he had just been liberated. After the driver left, Rayleigh pretended to strike the firestone, but in reality he used Kido to create the flame. Once the fire started, the moisture in the damp branches was quickly evaporated, and they began crackling. Hearing that sound, the driver turned back in surprise. "You got the fire going that quickly, Frisia-san, right?" "That's amazing." The others, who had been starting to grow irritated because the fire would not catch, also immediately relaxed. With the fire lit, everyone gathered around and sat in a circle. Frisia was his alias. After all, the name Yodasai of the Hephaestus familia was rather well known. He was not sure how widely it had spread, so he had used a false identity. For that, he had even dyed his white hair red. As for why red, it was simply because it looked cool. There was no deeper reason. A handsome white-haired boy, plus the sword at his waist, made it too easy for people to guess his real identity. So this time, he only carried Sakanade. All the other swords were being transported into the royal capital by Lulyun for him. I'm at least a mercenary, so I'm quite skilled at this sort of thing. As he said that, Rayleigh also began getting into the role of a mercenary. At dinner, one of the women asked him what kind of big scenes he had witnessed while working as a mercenary. So he slipped into the role of a bard and started telling stories. Even after dinner, he kept talking for a full hour. Because there was only one driver, he needed sleep and rest at night to keep up his energy. He was just an ordinary man without fauna, so there was no way he could go several days without sleep. And even if he could endure it, the horses also needed rest and sleep. At a pace of 50 kilometers a day, by noon on the 5th day after departure, the Rakia kingdom finally appeared before everyone's eyes. "Sir, we've arrived at the Rakia kingdom. You'll have to walk the rest of the way yourself. Otherwise the carriage will also have to undergo inspection, and every person will be questioned." "Understood. Thank you." Rayleigh nodded to the other passengers in the carriage, then jumped down. He was not wearing a shahakusho since it was too conspicuous. At that moment, he was wearing a white shirt, with a beige vest over it. Simple protective gear covered his right knee, the half of his chest where his heart was, and his right shoulder. Over that, he wore a linen-colored cloak and carried a simple cloth bag. The only thing on him that looked valuable was the zanpakuto at his waist. To avoid arousing other people's greed, he had deliberately not polished the blade. At the moment, Sakanade's blade was full of nicks, and even the handle wrapping looked dusty, making it look like a blunt sword on the verge of being worn out. To anyone, he looked like nothing more than a travel-worn wandering mercenary. Especially the armor. Because of poverty, many mercenaries' defensive gear pursued maximum practicality. There was no need to protect the entire chest. As long as the heart was not pierced, one could survive. The right arm had to be protected properly, so that injury would not prevent one from gripping a weapon. When Rayleigh arrived at the city gate, he discovered that he seemed to have hit rush hour. At the moment, around 20 people had gathered there, lining up to be inspected. Rayleigh quietly walked to the back of the line and simply waited for his turn. A full 10 minutes passed, yet the line had only moved forward a little. Rayleigh was starting to get bored. And just then, he felt someone bump into his shoulder. Looking up, he saw a group of several burly men swaggering toward the city. The guards at the gate all looked extremely respectful when they saw them, and let them all pass through without inspection. Rayleigh glanced at the back of one of them. That emblem there was no mistake. So it's the Ares Familia. Rayleigh looked a couple more times, then withdrew his gaze. Finally, it was his turn. One of the gate guards looked him over. Seeing that he was dressed in ragged clothes, the man looked down on him a little. But after noticing the sword at his waist, he still asked a few extra questions. "Who are you, and what are you coming to Rakia for?" "Wandering mercenary. Looking for lodging and work." "A mercenary?" The guard sized him up a few times, then finally fixed his gaze on the sword and said, "Draw your sword." "Let me see it." Rayleigh obediently drew Sakanade. Seeing that the sword was as shabby as its owner, the guard snorted coldly. "A third-rate bastard, eh?" Rayleigh paid no attention to the mockery. He simply sheathed the sword again, then took out a paintbrush and a sheet of music from his bag. "I'm also a painter and I know a bit about performing." The guard could not read sheet music, but what was on the drawing paper looked pretty good. Even as someone who understood nothing about art, he still felt it was well drawn. So he said, "A skinny guy like you compared to being a mercenary, you'd do better putting your energy into painting." "All right, go on." Chapter 140, Chapter 140, Kidnappers. 1369 words after successfully entering the city, Rayleigh picked one of the inns marked as recommended on the map Hermes had given him and checked in. After that, he went to the employment office. This was the intermediary center of the Rakia kingdom. Not only could people post and accept jobs here, they could also find work through mediation, by information, and so on. He had come here to see whether there was any way to get in contact with the Phobos Familia. Unfortunately, things were indeed not that simple. He strolled through the streets and toured the city, but in reality, he was confirming whether the map in his head was reliable. Standing on a bridge in the lower city and seeing that there was no one around, he directly sat on the railing, eating the skewers he had bought while looking in the direction of the royal palace. His current position was the outer part of the royal capital, also called the lower city. Besides that, there were also the middle city, upper city, commercial district, temple district, noble district, and the royal palace. To enter the middle city or upper city, one had to at least join some gods familia and obtain fauna. All the other lower people could only live on the edges of the city. Trying to openly enter the middle city or upper city during the daytime was impossible. Rayleigh waited until nightfall. Inside his room, he felt the timing was about right, so he used spirit particles to construct a set of black clothes, and also created a mask. The mask had clawmark-like patterns on it, giving it a sinister and terrifying look. Too bad it's just for appearances, and it's not real holification. Rayleigh sighed, put the mask on his face, then coughed twice, and used the vibration of Ryuryoku to alter his voice, successfully giving himself the same electronic distortion as White. After nodding in satisfaction, he hit his figure with a light bending effect, then leapt straight out of the window. His figure bounded through the night sky, ignoring the district restrictions, and began searching according to the places he had memorized in his mind. The first places he searched were the middle city and the upper city. These two districts contained many of the lower-ranked familias. Given the circumstances of the goddess Phobos, being thrown into a place like that would not be strange at all. And if she was not there, then Rayleigh judged that the temple district was the most likely place. Because of Ares' dictatorship, the Rakia kingdom did not permit temples to any god other than himself. They didn't even allow statues of other gods to be built. So the so-called temple district was really just where Ares' private military forces were stationed. And wasn't a place like that perfect for keeping prisoners. With that in mind, after finding nothing in the two city districts, Rayleigh went directly to the temple district. Thanks to his ability to turn invisible, and his three-dimensional mobility through the air, infiltrating this place was like walking into an empty courtyard. By now, it was already night. The only brightly lit place left was the great sanctuary. According to the intelligence, this was the sacred place where Ares bestowed divine blessings. As the father of the nation, the moment Ares granted fauna was considered a holy act within the kingdom, something that had to be displayed publicly. At this moment, the great sanctuary was brightly lit. However, the lighting inside still relied entirely on firelight. Unlike Ororio, where magic stones had already been applied to daily life, even the street lamps there were powered by magic stones. Rayleigh entered the sanctuary and erased the sound of his footsteps. Then he saw a girl praying inside. The girl wore luxurious clothes. Her hands were clasped together, her golden hair naturally hanging down. Her eyes were closed, and the long eyelashes above them seemed to shimmer with a crystalline light. Rayleigh stared at that girl for a while and found that she was probably 15 or 16 years old. Her skin was fair, delicate, and full of luster. Together with those clothes, it was obvious that she came from the nobility. And most likely, not just any noble either, but a very high-ranking one. If he asked her, would he get the answer he wanted? Just as Rayleigh was weighing whether it was worth disturbing her suddenly, a group of 3 climbed in through the opposite window. Rayleigh noticed them immediately. But Rayleigh was invisible, so the other side didn't notice him at all. "You people RMMPH." The 3 intruders rushed forward without another word, and seized the noble girl who had been praying. Rayleigh thought. For some reason, either out of curiosity, or a sudden whim, Rayleigh followed them. "We did it." Didn't expect it to go this smoothly. Those knights were probably afraid of offending this little brat, so they stayed far away. Why, you insolent wretches? Who are you? Put me down, the noble girl shouted at the kidnappers. But in the next second, a strip of cloth was tightly bound over her mouth. The girl struggled desperately, but her strength was no match for theirs. Her fair wrists were gripped hard, and after struggling, they turned red. Stay still. The girl was slapped and fell to the ground. Her eyes turned frightened, and tears welled up in her eyes. TCH, troublesome little noble lady. This girl's skin is really nice. So pale it almost glows. I've never touched a woman this beautiful before. If you don't want to die, then don't get any stupid ideas. Otherwise the money we were supposed to get paid will turn into a bounty on our heads. Ha, I'm only going to touch a little. This little brat isn't old, but her body's already developed this much. Damn nobles, she must eat delicacies every day. Seeing the man licking his lips as he approached, the girl shrank back in terror. No, don't. Why is something like this happening to me? Big brother. The girl shut her eyes in despair. And at that very moment a figure soundlessly appeared behind the man wearing that vile grin. The leader of the three-man group was stunned for 0.1 seconds when he saw that scene. What the how did this guy appear? No, wait, now's not the time to be shocked. He hurriedly shouted a warning. Behind you, the blade flashed once under the moonlight. The man kept that disgusting expression on his face. Until the moment he died, he never understood what had happened. Half of his body remained standing where it was, but his upper half had already fallen to the ground. The leader instantly dragged the remaining subordinate backward. The two of them retreated 2 meters, staring at the suddenly appeared Rayleigh with horror and vigilance. At that moment, the noble girl also opened her eyes again. Then she saw a long, black silhouette. Was this person here to save me? In that instant, a glimmer of hope rose in the girl's heart. The enemy leader, however, felt the exact opposite. This guy's not re-gh, be careful. Low halfway through speaking, the man suddenly discovered that not far away, a head was lying on the ground, wearing a stunned expression as it stared back at him. That face low. Cold sweat poured down the man's body. He stiffly turned his head, and looked at the figure he had just been dragging with him. The head was gone. Ayaha! The man let out a miserable scream, then his legs gave way and he collapsed to the ground. T2 terrifying. He had absolutely no idea what had happened, and yet his 2 capable subordinates had already been cut down. Aside from that first slash, he had not noticed at all how Low's head had been severed. If that slash had been aimed at him, then he would now Why does my neck feel hot? What is this? This scorching red. What is it exactly? Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya Translator Chapter 141. Chapter 141, Bodyguard 1444 words. All 3 of them possessed a fauna, but none of them were above level 1. Rayleigh had killed them instantly without using even a tenth of his strength. Judging from the conversation just now, these men deserved to die. That was why he had struck without hesitation, and without holding back. Human traffickers were the sort of filth that made people sick to their stomachs, no matter what world they were in. The blonde young lady stared at the masked man in front of her, a little frightened. It wasn't as if she had never seen bloody scenes before. But this was the first time she had ever seen someone cut cleanly in half with a single slash, or watched a head fly from its body while the severed face still wore the same expression it had a moment before. Feeling afraid of someone so brutal was only natural. Her 2 long legs, wrapped in white stockings, trembled slightly. Rayleigh walked toward her step by step and raised the blade in his hand. Am I going to die? The blonde girl's eyes widened. For some reason, now that the moment had come, she could not even close them. The blade fell. The girl stared blankly at the ropes that had been cut apart, and then at the cloth gag that had fallen from her mouth. For a moment, she had no idea how to react. You can scream if you want. But if possible, I'd like you to answer a few questions first. Rayleigh's electronically distorted voice made the girl blink her watery eyes several times. She did not scream, nor did she call loudly for help. Her instincts told her that the person before her would not hurt her. Your voice is really interesting. Rayleigh? Was this girl missing a screw somewhere? Forget it. As long as she could help him gather information, that was enough. First question. Do you know the goddess Phobos? The girl froze for a moment, then answered, I know of her, yes. But why are you looking for that goddess? Rayleigh had no intention of satisfying her curiosity. He went straight to the next question. Then my second question. How can I meet her? Tomorrow, there will be a ceremony held at the great cathedral. All the gods, including the father of the nation, will be present. Naturally, that includes the goddess Phobos as well. A ceremony? Rayleigh immediately understood. So tomorrow was the day Ares would bestow fauna upon new members. All the gods would be present, huh? He wondered how tight the security would be. With gods present, he did not dare to use Sakanede's Bankai. If even the gods were affected and their perception of friend and foe was reversed, causing them to unleash their divine power and start attacking one another at full strength, this world would be flattened by the full might of the gods in less than 5 minutes. Shirkai would be fine. But Shirkai had a limited range. Even if he could take the goddess away, he would have to endure a pursuit across hundreds of kilometers. He was only one person. Sooner or later, his strength would run out. If he could use a high-level spatial transfer Keto, that would be another matter entirely. He could simply teleport straight back to Rio. But that sort of ability was nothing more than a fantasy before level 6. It was not something he could accomplish just by burning a little lifespan or overdrawing his Ryatsu. The best-case scenario was still to quietly take the target away. If he could delay exposure by 1 or 2 days, that would be ideal. By then, he would have already fled far enough that catching up to him would be nearly impossible. And after the ceremony? After that, there will obviously be a banquet. The girl answered without even thinking. Rayleigh's eyes flickered. A banquet, huh? That sounded like a good opportunity. The question was whether he could sneak inside. Seeing him fall into thought, the girl suddenly took the initiative and asked, Do you want to attend the banquet? I can take you there. Rayleigh looked surprised. It wasn't that he was surprised she had the ability to do so. Whether it was her appearance, her bearing, or her clothing, everything about this girl radiated nobility. It was not the kind of presence a fallen aristocrat could possess. She was someone tied to power, and at quite a high level at that. She had to come from a renowned noble house. The problem was, why would she help him? Just because of what had happened here. Did she really not suspect anything? Rayleigh felt somewhat doubtful, but this was a good opportunity. But if it was a trap, it might lead him straight into danger. You think I'm going to do something bad, don't you? Let me make this clear first. I only want to repay you for saving my life. As for who you are or what you intend to do, I'm not interested at all. The girl seemed extremely displeased at being suspected. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and gave a small huff. It was such a tiny movement, yet it caused a deeply convincing, heart-shaking bounce. Very persuasive indeed. Besides, even if you wanted to do something to a goddess, it would be impossible. That much is common knowledge. The blonde girl smiled. But a trace of unwillingness flashed through her eyes. It seemed she knew that mortals could not kill gods. And from that expression, had she actually tried to kill one before? Then I'll be relying on you. In that case, may I ask for one tiny condition? A condition? You're strong, right? I can tell. You took down those 3 bad men instantly, before they even had time to react. I'm guessing you must have been a level 2. Unfortunately, she was just a little off. But Rayleigh did not show it. He simply chose to remain silent. In the girl's eyes, that was as good as confirmation. I want you to be my bodyguard until you finish your business. How about it? Bodyguard? Rayleigh's expression turned strange. The girl before him had a noble status. Even those traffickers had said that the knights outside did not dare approach the great cathedral simply because they were afraid of offending her. That alone proved she was absolutely among the highest ranks of Rakia Kingdom's social pyramid. And she was likely someone with tremendous potential as well. In a country ruled by the war god Ares, even a duke could become a fallen noble overnight, if he could not demonstrate enough value. After all, Ares was a war god. He was interested only in war. His only demand of his familia was strength. Nothing else. In that case, her safety should have been treated as a top priority. Yet now she wanted a complete stranger to serve as her bodyguard. No matter how he looked at it, something about this was strange. Even so, Rayleigh did not refuse. Until my business is finished, I'll protect you. The moment he agreed, the girl immediately broke into a delighted smile. Then it's a promise. No matter what, you have to protect me. Ahaha, I suppose that's asking a little too much. Then let's put it this way. When you feel that things have become too dangerous, I permit you to abandon me. Halfway through making her promise, the girl suddenly lowered the standard herself. That made Rayleigh even more confused. In Rakia Kingdom, what kind of danger could a great noble's daughter possibly encounter that would make her sound so pessimistic? This was starting to feel a little interesting. He would just treat it as accepting a side quest. Then please take me back first. The girl smiled sweetly and even spread her arms toward him. You wouldn't make a lady walk all that way herself, would you, Sir Knight? Rayleigh shook his head inwardly, then stepped forward and lifted the girl into his arms. Her golden hair spilled downward, almost dragging along the ground. Rayleigh reacted quickly. With a single leap, he shot straight into the air. After that, he continuously created footholds with Ryuryoku, jumping higher and higher. In the blink of an eye, he had reached the sky above. When the girl realized that she was actually being carried through the air, not only was she unafraid, her eyes instead filled with sparkling excitement. This is just like a dream. Chapter 142, Chapter 142, she was going to leak. 1405 words right now, I'm walking through the air. Technically, she was being carried. But so this was what it felt like to look down on the earth from the sky. It felt so free. The sky was so close. It felt as though I could touch it simply by reaching out. The girl raised her hand and closed her palm around the stars overhead. Eleonora. My name is Eleonora. What about you, Sir Knight? After hesitating for roughly half a second, Rayleigh said, Ulquiorra Cipher. That's a fake name, isn't it? The blonde girl, Eleonora, saw straight through the truth behind Rayleigh's silence. Her face immediately filled with dissatisfaction. I have no idea what you're talking about. The girl gave a spoiled little huff, but she did not continue pursuing the matter. The two soon returned to the great cathedral. Rayleigh placed the girl back where she had been praying earlier. Under the lights of the great cathedral, the injuries on her body became even more obvious. Eleonora noticed his gaze immediately and smiled bitterly. Ah, this is going to be rather troublesome. I suppose I'll have to choose a special outfit to hide them. Rayleigh shook his head. Using Kido, he condensed a mirror and placed it in front of the girl. Eleonora looked at herself in the mirror, only then realizing that the corners of her mouth had also been left with 2 red marks from the rough treatment she had suffered. The girl cried out in alarm. Her attitude was completely different from when she had been looking at the injuries on her body. This time, she was clearly anxious. Oh no, what should I do? Will these disappear before tomorrow? Rayleigh let out a long breath. He raised his hand and lightly touched his finger in front of the girl's face, releasing a faint glow. The power of Kaido began to take effect. The wounds at the corners of Eleonora's mouth and on her cheeks quickly faded. In just a few seconds, they vanished completely. After that, the injuries on her body also began healing rapidly. Even her body, which had been chilled by the night wind, grew warm again. It's so warm. You can even use healing magic. The blonde young lady looked at her radiant reflection in the mirror with delight, offering Rayleigh no small amount of admiration. She touched the places where she had been injured. There was no strange sensation at all. It was as though the wounds had never existed in the first place. Then I'll be going now. Rayleigh turned, intending to leave. But the girl immediately called out to stop him. Where are you going? It has already started, you know. Your escort mission. Eleonora tilted her adorable little head. That's right. We already made a promise, didn't we? Until you finish your business, you have to protect me. When she smiled, her eyes curved like crescent moons. She was cute, certainly. But she truly gave Rayleigh a headache. He pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to ease the pressure there. This was a little troublesome. He still had something else he needed to do next. Then I'm going out for a bit. I'll be back in less than an hour. During that time, as long as you stay here, you'll be safe. As Rayleigh spoke, he snapped his fingers. Around the girl, 3 Ryoryoku anchor points were constructed, then connected to one another, forming a pale green triangular barrier. The girl's face filled with surprise and curiosity as she began touching and examining the barrier that now protected her. By the time she turned back around, Rayleigh had already disappeared. And just then, the girl's formerly excited expression suddenly froze. Then it changed into the look of someone facing the greatest crisis of her life. Oh no, oh no. This feeling. She had not felt anything at all a moment ago, so why had it suddenly burst out now? At this rate, she was going to leak. The girl clamped her legs together, her cheeks flushing red. But this barrier worked both ways. The outside world might not be able to harm her, but she could not get out either. Hey, you have to be joking. Come back here, Ulqui something. The despairing girl forced herself to endure, tears nearly squeezing out of her eyes. She did not dare call for help. Putting aside whether the knights outside could even break this barrier, if they came in and witnessed her social death scene, how was she supposed to keep living? She would rather die than let that happen. And so the girl began to pray. Meanwhile, Rayleigh had returned to the inn. Using Kyoko to conceal himself, he slipped back into the room. The moment he entered, he saw a beastman girl sniffing and searching around every corner of the place. What are you doing? The boy's voice suddenly rang out of thin air. Lillian, who had been carefully investigating the details of the room, was so frightened that she jumped on the spot. If she had not reacted quickly and covered her own mouth, she probably would have drawn the attention of others. Why you? She pointed at Rayleigh, who had suddenly popped out of nowhere, her voice trembling non-stop. Both of her legs were shaking as well. Rayleigh was honestly a little impressed to see her here. You really did sneak in. Well, I'm technically a professional. Lillian seemed like she wanted to protest Rayleigh's wording, but she was also somewhat timid, so she could only mutter softly. Then did you bring my sword in as well? Of course. I'm not carrying it on me, but I guarantee I can get it into your hands whenever you need it. Thanks for your trouble. Rayleigh exchanged information with Lillian. He also asked her whether she knew of a noble young lady in Rakia Kingdom named Eleonora. In his memory, that name was not on the list of people he needed to pay special attention to. Eleonora. Lillian thought for a while, then shook her head. Afterward, she asked Rayleigh to explain the whole process of how he had met that girl. After listening, the beastman girl's face took on a look that clearly said, "Are you messing with me? What is that supposed to be, a fairy tale?" A hero saving a beauty. An adventurer and a princess. Two people bound together by fate. Don't ask me. Rayleigh also felt a little awkward under her teasing. After all, that kind of experience really did sound like the opening to one of those romantic love stories. The Beastman girl shuddered all over. I'm getting goosebumps. Is it really that bad? Forget it. I'll investigate the identity of the Eleanor girl, but I advise you not to get your hopes up. That's probably a fake name too. A fake name? Rayleigh thought about it briefly. He did not actually think so. After all, the other party had asked him to serve as her bodyguard. After this, he would definitely come into contact with people who knew her. Servants, nobles, whoever they might be. When that time came, her real name would naturally be exposed. In that case, using a fake name would be meaningless. Is that advice from experience? That's how it always goes in romance adventure novels. You can shut up now. Rayleigh was speechless. By the way, do you like reading that sort of thing? No, I don't. But you seem very familiar with them. In our line of work, even if you don't want to know about them, you hear so much that you get sick of it. The Chianthrope's eyes turned weary. It was as though she had remembered some terrible past. Come here for a moment. Before they split up, Rayleigh called the Beastman girl to a stop. Lillian approached him nervously. Rayleigh used a sealing technique to seal a simplified version of Tantikura onto the back of the girl's hand. This is my magic. I'm lending it to you temporarily. With your mind, you should be able to use it 2 or 3 times, around 30 seconds each time. Contact me if anything urgent happens. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya-translator Chapter 143, Chapter 143, Download a hypnosis app. 1323 words. Eleonora was currently facing the greatest crisis of her life. Whether she wet herself or held it in until she died would determine whether she suffered social death or actual death. Why are you in that position? When Rayleigh returned to the great cathedral, he saw that the girl, who had originally been kneeling in prayer with an incredibly sacred air, was now trapped inside the barrier in an extremely indecent posture. Her backside was raised high in the air, her entire face pressed against the floor, her arms tucked between her legs while she clamped her thighs together with all her might. The moment Eleonora saw Rayleigh return, and saw that he was actually looking at her with disgust, fury surged up inside her. She desperately wanted to stand up, point at his nose, and curse him out. But she truly could not do it. Worse still, she had to beg this man for help. Please, I need to that thing. You understand, right? Please understand. Rayleigh frowned as he looked at the girl, whose face was filled with shame and rage to the point that she looked ready to kill herself, then glanced at her strange posture. Then he looked at the barrier he had set up. So that was it. He was silent for about 3 seconds. But to Eleonora, those 3 seconds felt as long as 3 years. I can't. I'm at my limit. Seeing this, Rayleigh instantly removed the barrier, grabbed the girl by the back of her collar, and used the fastest chuinpa of his life to throw her into the restroom. Standing outside the door, Rayleigh had not even had time to leave, when he heard the sound of running water from inside. Eleonora buried her head in her knees. She was too embarrassed to look up. In the end, a little had still leaked out. That masked bastard. What Sir Knight? From now on, she was calling him masked bastard. That brute. He should be called masked brute bastard. At the corners of the girl's eyes, tears shimmered like tiny pearls. They were tears of humiliation. 5 minutes later, the girl came out while lifting the hem of her dress, her face filled with shame, anger, and resentment. Seeing her aggrieved expression, Rayleigh actually found it a little funny. But he had to hold it in. Otherwise, this girl might spend the next half-day being furious. The two returned to the great cathedral. Rayleigh asked, "What are you doing here alone this late at night?" There are guards outside, and someone even came here specifically to kidnap you. The girl maintained her praying posture. Once she entered that state, the sacred air radiating from her entire body made her appear incomparably holy. Almost like, I will also be participating in the ceremony, so I came here in advance. This is called a purification ritual. For 1 week before receiving a fauna, I have to pray continuously in the great cathedral and bathe in holy water. I also cannot be disturbed by the outside world. Today is the final day. You're a candidate member of Ares Familia. Something like that. So this girl was actually an enemy. Though it was not particularly surprising. In Rekia Kingdom, those with the highest status were the trusted followers of the war god Ares. Given this girl's position, that was only natural. Suddenly, Rayleigh thought of a key question. So you have to pray here for 7 days straight, and cannot be disturbed. What about meals? Grrrrrr. As if answering his question, Eleonora's stomach immediately began to growl. Her face collapsed. She complained, that's why I've only eaten offerings meant for the gods and drunk water these past few days. I feel like I'm about to die. Seeing how pitiful she looked, Rayleigh thought for a moment, then took the leftover skewers out of his bag. Sniff, sniff. The moment the skewers appeared in the air, the blonde girl smelled their fragrance. She instantly sat up straight, her eyes fixed firmly on the skewers in Rayleigh's hand. Rayleigh emphasized, wait. These are cold, give me a moment. Rayleigh altered the arrangement of rasher, created a flame, and reheated the cooled skewers. Fortunately, this place was spacious enough. The smell would not spread all the way outside the great cathedral. Rayleigh handed the skewers to the girl. After Eleonora took them, she immediately bit off a large mouthful, and began chewing with all her might, her cheeks puffed out like a rabbit's. Before long, the 2 large pork skewers, weighing over 400 grams altogether, had been completely devoured by a girl who looked barely over 100 pounds. I wasn't actually praying the entire time. The girl suddenly began to explain. When I first came here on the first day, I really did accept my fate, and wanted to pray properly. But after holding out for about 10 minutes, I spent the rest of the time cursing non-stop and begging for death. Rayleigh froze. This girl truly had no sense of reverence toward the gods. For a native of this world, that was an extremely rare attitude. Then if I stay by your side, won't someone suspect my identity? You can just knock out a knight and put on his armor. There's a helmet anyway, so no one can see your face. It'll be fine. The girl sounded very experienced. She also seemed to feel no guilt whatsoever toward the knight who was about to be victimized. I'm so bored. The girl, whose stomach was now nice and full, lay down flat on the polished floor of the great cathedral in a spread-eagle position. Seeing her like this, Rayleigh felt that his earlier association of her with a saint had truly been a moment of blindness. The girl was so bored that she started rolling back and forth on the floor. Rayleigh glanced at her, then activated Ryuraku. Immediately after, he suddenly discovered that the color of the girl's spirit ribbon was that of an adventurer. In other words, she was not an ordinary person. She had already received a fauna, and possessed ability values. Yet tomorrow, she was still going to receive Ares's fauna. Which meant this was a conversion. After realizing this, Rayleigh asked, which familia did you originally belong to? The girl's rolling suddenly stopped. She lay face down on the ground and did not make a sound for a long time, almost as if she had fallen asleep. Seeing her reaction, Rayleigh no longer intended to press the issue. But Eleonora still spoke. Bautet Familia. Have you heard of it? Even if you're only pretending, could you not answer that quickly? At least then I could feel a tiny bit of respect from you toward that goddess. I've heard of it. You're lying. What a troublesome girl. I suspected this earlier, but don't tell me you like men. Otherwise, there's no way your attitude toward a super beautiful girl like me should be this bad. You really are overly confident. Are you saying I'm not cute? That I'm not beautiful? The blonde girl proudly puffed out her chest and lifted her chin, revealing her graceful, fair, swan-like neck without the slightest crease. On this point, Rayleigh could not exactly lie with his eyes open. The girl was indeed very beautiful. Calling her a peerless beauty capable of ruining nations would not be an exaggeration. However, there was no shortage of women around Rayleigh whose beauty was shocking enough to overturn common sense. By now, he had already built up a considerable resistance. I admit you are beautiful. But if you think that alone is enough to make people obey your every word, my suggestion would be to download a hypnosis app. Chapter 144, Chapter 144, Breeding Mare 1311 words. The blonde girl looked utterly confused, baffled by a word she had never heard before. Rayleigh had no intention of continuing the conversation, so he simply leaned against the wall and closed his eyes to rest. Eleonora puffed out her cheeks in frustration, but she did not bother him again. By the time the sky began to brighten, Rayleigh stood up, stretched lazily, and walked outside the great cathedral to randomly find some unlucky victim. You'll do. About 3 or 4 minutes later, Rayleigh was standing in the original owner's post, dressed in a set of silver-white armor. Inside the great cathedral, after cleansing herself, Eleonora changed into her ceremonial attire. At 8 in the morning, large numbers of nobles, gods, and general-class figures arrived one after another. Rayleigh observed every single person while eavesdropping on their conversations, but unfortunately, he did not hear much valuable information. Instead, what he heard only made him uncomfortable. Because 2 of the nobles were actually exchanging experiences on how to train slaves. They used money to hire people to kidnap whatever type of person suited their tastes. Then they accepted anything delivered to them. Human trafficking. That was what they were doing. It disgusted Rayleigh. Today is an important day for that person. Let's set those matters aside for now, lest we invite trouble. Speaking of which, that talentless princess actually awakened a skill. What a curious twist of fate. To think she would possess the same talent as the queen. I truly did not expect it. It means the princess, like her mother, is an important tool for Rakia Kingdom. So that was it. A princess. No wonder her name was Eleonora. And he had the feeling he had just heard quite a bit of information that would cause serious trouble if it ever became public. Our God and His Majesty the King have arrived. Oh. Amid the commotion, a neat procession entered through the outer gates of the great cathedral. Then one figure ignored all discipline and strode straight ahead. No one dared say a word to him. There was only one reason. He was the father of this nation. The war god, Ares. Draped in a cloak and clad in armor, this was formal dress as far as a war god was concerned. Everyone's here already. Glory to our patron god. The nobles, knights, members of Ares Familia, and priests all knelt one after another. Rayleigh glanced at the fellow sentries standing guard beside him, and found that they had not knelt either. Come to think of it, the leg armor of this suit had an extremely large coverage area, and the movable sections around the joints were very limited. This armor had not been designed to kneel at all. At most, it allowed the wearer to walk. It could not even properly run, it was purely ceremonial armor. But that suited him just fine. Rayleigh had no desire to kneel to this kind of god anyway. He diligently continued standing guard while activating Ryuraku to examine the strength of everyone present. There were actually this many gods. 2 level 3s. 10 level 2s. Aside from them, most were level 1. As for ordinary people without a fauna, there was not a single one. So that was how it was. The structure of power and class in this country was truly clear at a glance. In Orario, adventurers also held fairly high status, but perhaps because there were so many of them, and because the guild managed them, adventurers were more like guardians of the city than a privileged class. Of course they enjoyed privileges too, but cases of them bullying civilians rarely occurred. Civilians could even use morality to pressure adventurers. In Rakia, that was impossible. If any civilian dared to do such a thing, they would be convicted of insulting a warrior. The war god Ares only favored powerful warriors. He was not a god who treated all children of the lower world with mercy. In fact, one could even call him cruel. He did not bear justice on his shoulders, he only pursued the pleasure of war. On top of that, he was missing a screw in his head, acted without considering the consequences, and possessed a troubling level of mobility. That was Rayleigh's simple summary based on his understanding of Ares. The main character had arrived first, and only then did the ceremonial procession enter. Among that procession was a handsome man with a troubled expression. His gaze was fixed entirely on Ares, like an adult worrying over an immature child. That was the king of Rakia, Marius. Your Majesty. Hey, Marius, hurry up already, Ares called to the king of an entire nation, turning his head as though this were the most natural thing in the world. To the cunning nobles, a so-called god, once his divine power was sealed, was little more than a mascot. A machine that bestowed fauna. As long as they worshipped him properly, their own status would remain secure. The way they looked at Ares even carried a touch of indulgent affection, because whether a god ruled the kingdom, or the royal family ruled the kingdom, it did not affect their pleasures. A troublesome king was worse than a patron god with nothing but war in his head. What a pitiful man. Rather than a king, Marius was more like a puppet. Or perhaps, Ares's secretary. Aside from handling endless state affairs every day and cleaning up after Ares, there was nothing for him to do. It was truly absurd. Truly laughable. Just before entering the great cathedral, Ares suddenly stopped beside Rayleigh. He stared curiously and with surprise at this extraordinary guard before him, his eyes shining with interest. What an impressive warrior. Ares praised him, then nodded in satisfaction. However, he did not do anything else and simply entered the great cathedral. Rayleigh let out a breath of relief. That guy. No matter how ridiculous he seemed, he was still a god. Rayleigh had disguised himself to this degree and suppressed his reatsu to the utmost limit, yet Ares had still read the atmosphere he gave off, and judged that he was a capable warrior based purely on instinct. As expected of a war god. A god really was still a god, even if he was missing a few screws. Just then, a beautiful goddess walked past him. The moment Rayleigh saw her, he recognized her identity from her appearance. This was the goddess Phobos. The goddess had long golden hair, with streaks of red mixed into it as though they had been dyed there. The shape of her pupils resembled the star chart of Leo. She wore a white ceremonial dress decorated with feathers. Her expression was perfectly normal. She did not look as though she was troubled by anything in her life. But Rayleigh could sense the agitation in her heart. What was strange was that he did not see the goddess named Batet, whom Eleonora had mentioned. The ceremony seemed to be about to begin. Rayleigh expanded the perception of his Ryuraku and focused it inside the great cathedral. At the same time, he also learned the reason Eleonora had been chosen to enter Ares Familia. I didn't think a skill like this could exist. Rayleigh's expression darkened. Life gestation. Its effects were, life force greatly increases. Offspring born from the possessor will have tremendous potential. When carrying offspring, the possessor will permanently lose life force. Something like this. Rather than calling it a rare skill, it was practically a curse. And worse, this was Rakia. Even as a princess, her fate could only be to become a breeding mare. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya Translator Chapter 145, Chapter 145, Carve Her Own Path. 1385 words. Ares was the embodiment of martial valor, the god who presided over war, slaughter, and riots. Every aspect of his arcanum was a disaster to the lower world. There was no reason to expect anything like morality from such a god. Once Ares had taken possession of a womb capable of producing outstanding warriors with absolute certainty, it was not difficult to imagine how he would use it. Eleanor's future was easy to picture. And it was bleak beyond measure. She would be forced to repeatedly pair with powerful men, or men who possessed excellent magic and skills, all to provide Ares with a fresh supply of high-grade combatants. From the greed in the eyes of the surrounding nobles, it was obvious that they had already begun looking at the princess as their target. "Your Highness, please step forward." The priest waved the staff in his hand, and the path ahead was filled with golden light. Rayleigh could tell that it was some kind of enchantment magic. Only, its effect was unclear. At present, aside from looking gorgeous, its only apparent function was providing illumination in a dimly lit setting. Barefoot, the girl walked across the red carpet and golden radiance, moving with measured steps until she arrived beneath the statue of the god. Ares sat upon the throne before the statue. As everyone knew, when receiving a fauna, or updating one's ability values, one had to remove their clothes and expose their back. But right now, they were in full public view. Many of the men present could barely suppress the expectation in their hearts, all of them wanting to see the princess's skin. "Come on, Aisha, take off your clothes," Ares commanded with great boldness. He did not consider complicated issues. So his reason for doing this was not because he wanted to humiliate the girl. He was simply impatient. Eleanor, or rather, Aisha, stood there with her hands clenched in front of her, her heart caught in an unbearable struggle. "Now that the moment has come, I really am afraid, mother. Was it like this for you back then too?" The girl glanced at the man standing beside Ares. Her elder brother. The king of this country. At that moment, Marius did not even direct his gaze toward her. His expression was extremely indifferent. As though the one about to be forced to expose her body in public was not his own younger sister. The tip of the girl's nose stung. She lowered her head, and her eyes turned dull and lifeless. With slightly trembling hands, she undid the clasp of her shawl. The shawl slid down along her slender shoulders and fell neatly to the floor. Her swan-like neck and rounded, snow-white shoulders were exposed. The men's wicked laughter was subtle, but it still reached her ears. "Mother." From within her ample bosom, she took out a pendant. Aisha clenched it tightly in her palm. And just then, she seemed to see words inside the gemstone set into the pendant. It was a message. She raised her head and looked toward the circular dome of the great cathedral. There she noticed light being refracted inside. She lifted the pendant with both hands and held it up to touch that beam of light. Then she saw a line of text. Or perhaps, a message left behind. "I hope my daughter can live by her own will." Was this her mother's final message to her? Her own will. To live freely. Aisha gritted her teeth. Memories from her childhood flashed through her mind, along with her mother's expression, empty and hollow like a walking corpse. She had always thought her mother hated her. Not only her, but the other children as well. Because they were monsters who had taken away her life. Because of their births, their mother had died at only 35 years old. And yet, she had left such a message hidden inside this pendant. This mechanism. It was designed so that Aisha would only discover it when she stood before the same choice her mother once had. After seeing this, the choice she made would decide her fate from this day onward. Would she become like her mother? Or would she resist? Even if she did not possess the strength to resist, her will would never submit. Aisha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she said firmly, "Ares, god of war. I refuse to become your tool. I will not accept your fauna, and I will not allow you to control me." Her sudden declaration shocked everyone present. Utter silence. The princess's words had stunned them all. For a time, not a single sound could be heard. Aside from the sound of flowing water, the great cathedral was deathly still. King Marius also looked toward the blonde princess in surprise. A moment later, someone suddenly shouted, "What kind of joke is this? To dare say such words to Lord Ares, this is disrespect. Do you even know what you're saying, Your Highness? Even for royalty, this is unforgivable." Ares watched the commotion unfold without the slightest change in expression, as though everything before him were an illusion. He looked at Aisha and said, "Batet Familia, the Familia you belong to, has already been defeated by me. And you are spoils of war. What is this talk of refusing? From the beginning, you never had that right." Ares's tone was calm. There was no psychological manipulation in it whatsoever. He was simply stating the facts. He stood up and said to the blonde girl below the steps, "Batet lost to me. Her Familia was absorbed by mine. This is war. It is only natural for the defeated to have everything taken from them. For you to speak of refusal is a tremendous misunderstanding. You have long since become mine. My spoil of war. One of my important strategic resources. I refuse." Ares? He looked at Marius beside him, scratched his head, then looked back at the girl. Had he said something wrong? Why was this girl still so stubborn? You are unwilling to contribute your power, yet you enjoy special treatment. Do you not find that shameful? Shameful. Aisha laughed from sheer rage. The ones who should feel ashamed are not me, but that incompetent king over there, whose country was stolen from him by you, and these people here who know nothing but pleasure and have no loyalty whatsoever. Girl, are you insulting my warriors? Ares grew angry, and his tone became much heavier. Without hesitation, he drew the sword at his waist and threw it down at the girl's feet. Aisha was afraid the blade would cut her, so she hurriedly dodged aside. Ares laughed and said, "I understand now. Because you were dragged down by Bastet's defeat, you refuse to accept this, don't you? Then pick up the sword and duel one of my warriors. The victor obtains everything. The defeated, no matter how they are treated, shall have no complaints. How about it? I am giving you, a loser, another chance to challenge me. There is no need to thank me for my magnanimity. Simply show me your strength." Ares called forth a knight. He had short brownish-yellow hair, deep-set eyes, a square face, and a tall, powerful build. Aisha looked at her opponent, and her expression turned ugly. What was this supposed to be? A sword duel? He wanted a powerless princess to fight a knight captain. Was this god's head made entirely of muscle? Now, Aisha finally understood how foolish it was to try to reason with a god of war. She did not complain, nor did she hesitate. Instead, she bent down, picked up the sword, gripped it tightly with both hands, and awkwardly assumed the stance of royal swordsmanship. To carve open a path with one sword, someone had once said, that was what chivalry was. It had been an ancient hero. She, too, had originally been a delicate princess, but when her nation faced crisis, she had stepped forward and became a princess knight whose name was recorded in history. Aisha had no desire to study what chivalry truly meant. But it seemed the time had indeed come for her to carve open a path. Chapter 146, Chapter 146, Control 1398 words. Aisha. From this day on, I'm abandoning that name. The blonde girl closed her eyes. After letting her resolve build for a moment, she opened those violet eyes again and raised her voice. The name my mother gave me, Eleonora, is my true name. With that, she focused her mind, placing all her attention on the enemy before her. Jaeger Milu. An upper-tier level 2 palace knight. In wartime, he was qualified to command 5,000 cavalry. He was known as a master swordsman, and his reputation was quite impressive. If one only looked at level, Eleonora was merely level 1, and all her ability values were at the lowest I rank. Her opponent was an upper-tier level 2. She had heard his strength had already reached D rank. Perhaps if their blades clashed even once, her wrist would snap. But Eleonora wanted to win. Please guide me. Flames burned in the girl's eyes. Her stance was proper but far from perfect. Her skill with the sword amounted only to a certain degree of courtly instruction. But it was the only weapon she had. Jaeger Milu looked at the beautiful girl before him and said, I am grateful to Lord Ares for granting me this opportunity. Be at ease, Princess Aisha. Once I defeat you in this duel, I will ask Lord Ares to let me become your first husband. This man's face was passable enough, but he truly was a narcissist. And extremely disgusting. I already abandoned that name. Eleonora raised the sword in her hands, charged forward, and swung it down at Jaeger. Jaeger merely turned his body to the side. The blade swept past right in front of him without injuring him in the slightest. Eleonora changed the downward chop into a slash, altering the direction of her blade, and cutting horizontally toward Jaeger. From the beginning, she had never thought such a wide, obvious attack would succeed. That was why she had kept half her strength in reserve to change her move. But it was still useless. Jaeger had already seen through her thoughts. After turning aside, he simply tapped his toes against the floor and retreated, stopping just outside the sword's range by less than a step. Her second strike missed as well. Eleonora did not hesitate. She quickly twisted her waist, turning like a ballet dancer, and used the strength of her whole body to swing the longsword in a full arc, unleashing a spinning slash. Jaeger was somewhat surprised that the princess before him had thought that far ahead. But all he did was draw the sword at his waist together with its scabbard. Without even unsheathing the blade, he used the hilt to block that fully accelerated slash. And he did not move an inch. As expected of Sir Jaeger. That man is level 2. I once personally saw him kill 5 wolves and a bear all by himself. I heard he even subjugated 10 goblins alone. Rayleigh, who had been watching the battle, frowned slightly. Upper tier. In his eyes, the strength Jaeger displayed was at most lower tier, perhaps barely approaching mid-tier. Putting aside talented individuals like Elise, Ryu, and Kaguya, any random member of Astria Familia could have dealt with this Jaeger within 3 moves when they were still lower tier level 2. And someone like Ace, that monster, did not even need to be mentioned. Against this Jaeger, she could instantly kill him without even taking a full moment. Was it because his opponents were all too weak? This was not strength worth boasting about. His swordsmanship was ordinary too, not even 1% of Kaguya's. And this was enough to be called a master swordsman. Rayleigh finally gained a rough understanding of the gap in combat power between Rio and the outside world. 5 wolves. 10 goblins. Wasn't that something a level 1 should be able to accomplish alone? He looked again at Eleonora, who was already beginning to tire. She had merely received a fauna but had never grown stronger. Her stamina was still that of a sheltered noble daughter. A long sword weighed around 3 pounds. Because of its length and weight distribution, making the tip reach the speed of sound in the instant of a slash would require more than 1,500 kilograms of arm strength. Only a slash of that level could pose a threat to Jaeger. Although Eleonora had only performed one continuous sequence of attacks, many parts of the body were involved in generating force, and it had consumed a considerable amount of stamina. Every sword she swung from this point on would be a forced movement that overdrew her physical strength. She said she would help me sneak into the banquet, so how did things end up like this? Rayleigh could not predict what would happen if she lost. In any case, Eleonora would probably become a reproductive weapon for the upper ranks of Rakia Kingdom. If she were a debauched woman, she might be able to use her importance to gain a lofty position. But from what Rayleigh had seen, she was someone who understood shame and valued her chastity deeply. To her, the life other people might dream of would be a living hell. And the previous holder of that skill had exhausted her life force and died at only 35 because of it. Eleonora would likely meet the same fate. It felt a little unpleasant to watch. Rayleigh rubbed his fingers together. Should he bombard the great cathedral with Keto, bury everyone here, and take the goddess Phobos away directly? He had not yet coordinated with Phobos. Acting like that would leave too many hidden dangers. Better to try that instead. Rayleigh gathered Ryuryoku in his palm, then shaped it, extending the spiritual power from his fingertips and transforming it into thin threads. To the people of this world, mind was not something visible. There was only one situation in which they could see the shape of magical energy with the naked eye, and that was when looking at magic stones dropped by monsters in the dungeon. Other than that, even elves could only sense magical energy, not see it. Rarely had tested it before. Even Riveria could not see Ryuryoku that had not yet been processed into magic. Then there was the matter of hiding one's Ryatsu. Without relying on some special magic item, Rayleigh had yet to meet anyone in this world who could truly conceal their own magical energy. Which meant it was worth a try. Creak in the middle of the battle, Eleonora suddenly froze. She felt as though she abruptly could not move. Or rather, she could not move according to her own will. Because her body was still moving. It was just that those movements were not coming from her thoughts or her control. What's happening? Is this? Did Jaeger do this? That was wrong. There was nothing unusual about Jaeger. It is time to end this, princess. With this strike, I shall carve the mark of Jaeger upon your body. Jaeger Miller smiled confidently, then swung his sword. In the next instant, the girl's figure moved. Completely different from her previous clumsiness and sluggishness, her figure suddenly vanished from where she had been standing. By the time Jaeger reacted and whipped his head around, he discovered that the blonde girl was already standing behind him. At the same time, a sharp pain tore across his cheek. The pain made him release his sword and cover his face with both hands. It hurts. The moment Jaeger's hands touched his face, another sting of pain shot through him. He looked at the blood on his palms. Only then did he understand. He had been cut. There was a gash on his face. Eleonora had absolutely no idea what had just happened. But she could feel a familiar warmth flowing through her body. Is it Ulquiorra? Is he helping me? After realizing this, Eleonora looked at Jaeger, whom she had wounded with her own sword, and could hardly believe it. She had actually cut that Jaeger Milu. Her heart was shaken. But on the surface, the girl was anything but docile. She spoke, not a bad mark. It suits you. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya Translator Chapter 147, Chapter 147, Gods Do Not Break Promises 1369 words. Seeing the girl immediately grow smug, Rayleigh felt he had caught a glimpse of the princess's fundamentally troublesome nature. He examined the spiritual threads extending from his fingertips. Only he could see them, thin strands of Ryuryoku descending from above, and connecting to the blonde girl's body. This was the Quincy clan's secret technique, Ransatengai. Right now, Eleonora was essentially a marionette being controlled by him. Originally, this was a supreme technique created by the Quincy to prevent aging bodies and severe injuries from affecting their ability to fight. In the face of this technique, things like dissolved muscles, severed tendons, broken bones, and fractures had no meaning. Because what was actually controlling the body was spiritual power. He had also tried using it on Jaeger, but it had failed. It seemed this technique could only control oneself, or individuals far weaker than oneself. If the target was even slightly too strong, they could directly resist it. Through these spiritual threads, he had also injected Kaido into the girl's body, repairing her muscle strain. And because of that operation, he discovered something else. He could cast Kido through the body of the person he was controlling. Just now, he had controlled Eleonora's body and used Shuinpa. Perhaps the intense pain she felt in that instant had triggered a massive surge of adrenaline. Her ankle still had not recovered. The girl had not yet realized that her ankle was already swollen. The power of Kaido was gathering there, repairing the overburdened joint. Too weak. I have to control her with far more precision. Rayleigh reviewed his own handling of the technique, then moved his fingers slightly. Eleonora's body moved again. The sword in the girl's hand thrust straight forward. Its target was Jaeger's eye. Jaeger was startled and hurriedly raised his sword to parry. But the girl's sword merely tapped lightly against Jaeger's blade before immediately pulling away. That light. The princess's ability values were at the lowest rank. The difference in strength between them was as vast as heaven and earth. That's right. There's no need to panic at all. Jaeger recovered from his alarm and immediately wanted to toss out a few cocky words, hoping to recover the dignity he had just dropped all over the floor. But the moment he moved his sword away, he saw a small, pale fist flying toward his face. Before Jaeger could react, the punch landed squarely on his eye socket. Tears burst from his eyes. He stumbled backward several steps, clutching his eye and groaning non-stop. How is this possible? Why is the princess's fist so strong? I'm level 2. Jaeger's ugly display made the surrounding spectators ridicule him, while also drawing a great deal of doubt and surprise. The doubt was directed at Jaeger. The surprise was directed at the princess. The princess is actually suppressing Jaeger. The princess is getting stronger the longer she fights. Don't tell me Jaeger is going to lose. What kind of joke is this? He can't even beat a woman. The doubts surrounding him grew denser, turning piercing and unbearable. Jaeger clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, then raised his head and glared viciously at Eleonora. Jaeger finally became serious. The speed he erupted with in that instant was several times greater than before. In a flash, he arrived in front of the princess, holding his sword with both hands. Eleonora was startled by his speed. But the response her body made did not match her panicked expression at all. She calmly raised her free left hand. With the heel of her palm facing upward, she pushed directly against the pommel of Jaeger's sword. Jaeger's momentum halted. Eleonora turned her body slightly, then extended one leg to block Jaeger's shin. Just like that, Jaeger fell forward, face first toward the floor. After Jaeger, clad in knight armor, collapsed, he struggled several times before barely managing to turn himself over. When the girl saw his sorry state, she could not help but laugh in an extremely unkind manner. Jaeger's neck turned red with anger. He punched the ground, then actually began removing his knight armor on the spot. In his eyes, it was this heavy armor that had caused him to be repeatedly toyed with by a weak woman. The people around them seemed to think the same thing. The moment Jaeger removed his armor, the same thought appeared in their minds. The game was over. This time, Jaeger did not even throw out any threats. He simply slashed directly at Eleonora. He intended to overwhelm all technique with pure force. The fastest, strongest strike. He would end the fight immediately. There were healers present so the princess would not die. Besides, it was necessary to brand his future woman with awe and fear toward him. Rayleigh could tell at a glance that his opponent had developed killing intent. He lifted his finger slightly and Eleonora began to move. She did not dodge or retreat, she charged straight toward Jaeger. When the distance was right, she raised her left hand and placed her palm directly against the side of the rapidly descending blade. Blue patterns covered her beautiful hand. With a light push, Jaeger immediately felt a tremendous force applied sideways to his sword, causing his whole body to tilt sharply. Eleonora lifted her leg high and kicked Jaeger in the neck. A ringing filled his ears as Jaeger's consciousness instantly drifted away. His mind went blank. Then Eleonora slashed Jaeger across the abdomen, only stopping after that. The intense pain dragged Jaeger back from his numb daze. He clutched his stomach and knelt on the ground in agony, his face pressed to the floor, his eyes filled with fear. He could feel blood spraying out of his abdomen. Scalding hot. And yet his body was growing colder and colder. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Healer, hurry and save me. Jaeger began crying for help at the top of his lungs. His disgraceful behavior made the people present show expressions of disgust. Even so, Marius still ordered the healers to use healing magic on him. After all, this was a level 2 high-grade combat asset. Then he looked at his younger sister in surprise. Aisha, when did you become so strong? Your skill, who taught you? Seeing that her elder brother had stepped forward without offering even the slightest word of concern, the blonde girl felt her heart fill with disappointment. At the same time, she gave up on him completely. He was no longer the elder brother from her childhood. Now he was only His Majesty the King of Rakia. And so, she ignored him entirely. Instead, she looked toward Ares. "Will you honor your promise, Lord God?" "Well done, girl, what a beautiful swordsmanship. You were practically like a Valkyrie. This only makes me feel even more strongly that bringing you into my familia is the right choice." Eleanora's expression changed when she heard Ares's words. She questioned him sharply, "Are you saying you don't intend to keep your promise?" "Gods do not break promises. But in war, victory and defeat are common occurrences. Even as the god of war, I am no exception. This time, it is true that you won. But I can wage war again and again without limit. As long as I am not dead, I will continue doing so forever." The princess was stunned. She had never imagined that a dignified god could be so shameless. And that he would act so openly unreasonable. Was this what a god was? When he said those words, there was not the slightest guilt or shame in him. Instead, he was simply carrying out his own beliefs. Were the values of gods truly so difficult for humans to understand? "Bloodkin of Marius, you have already fought once. I will not take advantage of your exhaustion. Tomorrow, I will arrange for you to fight a new opponent. As for the banquet, it will proceed as planned. Consider it an early celebration for such an excellent member joining my familia." Chapter 148. Chapter 148. I'll definitely go to Rio 12:29 words. Eleanora had fallen completely into despair. She dropped the sword in her hand. Then she collapsed to the floor, sitting there limply. From her biceps to her forearms, from her wrists to her fingers, every part of her arms ached so badly that she could no longer summon any strength. More importantly, her fighting spirit had been beaten down until it was barely alive. She understood now. With her strength alone, there was no way she could stand against the entirety of Rakia Kingdom. Nor could she resist a tyrannical, willful god. Unless she could defeat every single person in Rakia Kingdom, all by herself, she would never be able to escape this place. "I'm sorry. It seems our resistance was futile from the very beginning. Someone, take Her Highness back to the palace to rest." King Marius gave the order. Rayleigh had a flash of inspiration and used Ransatengai to control the empty suit of armor, making it walk into the great cathedral and help Eleanora up before leading her away from the scene. At the same time, he memorized the goddess Phobos's Ryatsu. With that, as long as she remained within the royal palace, he would be able to locate her through Ryaraku. Even if she went beyond that range, he could still use Bakudo number 58 to track her from a distance. As for the fact that Eleanora had not received Ares's fauna, some people below felt regret, while others felt relieved. But they all knew it was only a matter of time. Eleanora walked through the royal palace with vacant, lifeless eyes. Then, suddenly, a voice rang out. "Which way is your room?" The girl abruptly raised her head and looked at the knight beside her. "Are you Ulquiorra? That thing beside you is empty armor. I'm hiding right now and communicating with you through a unique technique." "Empty armor?" Eleanora stared in shock and began feeling around inside the suit of knight armor in front of her. Then she discovered that there really was no one inside. Seeing this strange phenomenon, she instantly connected it to what had happened earlier, when her body had moved beyond her control. "So your ability works on things other than people too. People are objects as well. In essence, they're no different from inorganic matter. But controlling humans is simpler, because I can borrow the body's own functions, which saves a lot of effort." The girl looked utterly confused. Rayleigh, however, suddenly grew animated. "You're one of those antis, huh? What was this guy talking about? He was so hard to understand." Following the girl's directions, Rayleigh brought her to the princess's residence. It was spacious. But if one asked whether it was luxurious, it did not quite reach that level. At most, it was decent. Considering that she had previously only been a dependent of a subordinate goddess, this kind of treatment was normal. Compared to her identity as a princess, her identity as a member of Ares Familia would have been far more useful. Thank you for helping me earlier. Being able to teach that narcissist a lesson honestly felt really satisfying. Eleonora forced a smile as she spoke. But there was not the slightest trace of the pleasure she described on her face. If I weren't a princess, that would have been nice. If I could, I'd like to be like the protagonists in stories, traveling everywhere, walking freely across the land, broadening my horizons, and adventuring to my heart's content. The girl curled up on the bed, hugging her knees and resting her face between them. Rayleigh had the empty suit of knight armor stand outside while he himself sat on a chair, tasting the special black tea provided by the royal palace. Although Rakia Kingdom's national strength felt backward to him, the quality of this tea was truly beyond criticism. As expected of parasites feeding off the nation, they would never mistreat themselves. Hearing the sound of him drinking tea, Eleonora's face fell. A pitiful princess is pouring out her tragic fate to you. Can't you show a little more consideration? Rayleigh opened the milk pot, added fresh milk into the black tea, and spoke with a calm expression. If I weren't considerate, your face would be black and blue right now. The princess pouted. After a moment, she could no longer endure the silence and asked again, "Hey, how many countries have you been to?" Because Rayleigh had claimed to be a wandering mercenary, that was why the girl asked. She thought that a wandering mercenary must have traveled through many places. Rayleigh was slightly stumped by the question. From his starting point to Rio, he had indeed passed through quite a few countries. Those countries each had their own characteristics, and their otherworldly atmosphere had been strong. Rayleigh had liked them well enough. But he could not really say whether any of them were good or bad. I've been to quite a few. Thailand, Singapore, America, things like that. The girl blinked her large eyes, her curiosity fully drawn out. She said in surprise, "So there are that many countries in the world." Those countries were not in this world at all. Although Rayleigh silently retorted in his heart, he could not say that aloud. "Oh, right. Have you been to Rio?" The girl suddenly asked in a voice full of expectation. That question made Rayleigh pause. He had not expected her to bring up Rio. "I've heard it's called the Labyrinth City, but I haven't been there yet." What a shame. Eleonora's excitement dimmed for a moment. But she soon recovered. She said, Rio is a city built on top of the Great Labyrinth, one of the 3 great unexplored regions. There are many gods and their familiars there, all aiming to conquer the Great Labyrinth. The adventurers of Rio are incredibly strong. In the war against Rakia Kingdom, there was even a hero who shattered an entire army all by himself. He was practically a figure straight out of legend. The girl seemed to have opened the floodgates, speaking endlessly about Rio. She was extremely interested in the stories that bards had brought from Rio. She also knew of many famous adventurers in the city. When Rayleigh heard titles like Nine Hell and Braver come from her mouth, his feelings became rather complicated. After all, those people were not exactly strangers to him. One could even say he was familiar with them. Their relationships were quite good too. If one day I can escape this cage, I'll definitely go to Rio and see the legendary Labyrinth City with my own eyes. As Rayleigh listened to the girl's longing, what he thought in his heart was that princesses and royal daughters really did seem to be more or less the same. Asfi was the princess of the seaside country. Kagaya was the princess of the Gajuno family, one of the 8 great noble houses of the Far East. Riveria was royalty among the elves. Even the black and white elves of Freya Familia were rulers from elven tribes. All he could say was that Rio truly deserved to be called the center of the world. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobaya Translator. Chapter 149, Chapter 149, Banquet 1269. Words before the banquet began, Rayleigh and Eleonora came up with a plan. Rayleigh would enter the banquet as a performer and provide musical accompaniment. In other words, he would be part of the atmosphere. You're really sure this is all right? Court musicians are all top class. I feel like there won't be any problem. You feel like? The princess sighed, then asked, fine. What instruments are you good at? Instruments? Rayleigh thought for a moment before answering, piano and violin, I suppose. Who taught you? I taught myself. How could you possibly teach yourself something like that? Are you joking? I really did learn by myself. If I had to say it, my teacher was sheet music. That does not make me feel reassured. Eleonora felt utterly exhausted. Just to be safe, she asked again, how long have you studied? Rayleigh counted on his fingers. Seeing him extend for fingers, Eleonora frowned slightly. Only 4 years. Music was a skill that required time to mature. Even a genius, without long study and guidance from a famous teacher, would quickly become no different from the masses. As for a self-taught musician with only 4 years of experience, they could not even be called third-rate. Rayleigh shook his head. Not 4 years. Not 4 years. How old was this guy anyway? With that mask on, she could not see clearly. Could he actually be much older than she thought? Was it just that his voice sounded young? How old are you, sir? No, I mean, are you saying you studied for 40 years? 4 days. Rayleigh gave an extremely calm answer that left Eleonora speechless. 4 days? Are you an idiot? 4 days? That means you're basically a complete beginner. Tonight's banquet is very important. If your performance is terrible, they really might cut off your hands on the spot, or even kill you. Seeing how worked up she was, Rayleigh said, but I think I play fairly well. My violin is decent too. Ah, forget it. I studied for 2 years myself. Listen to my level first, then reconsider. Among the court education the princess had received was musical performance. Coincidentally, she also knew how to play the violin. She took a case out of the cabinet, then removed a violin and bow from within. After a brief tuning, she began to play a solo piece. The melody had apparently been composed by an elven bard. As Rayleigh listened to the melody, he nodded slightly. His musical sensibility was fairly average. One could even say it was a little. He was not especially sensitive to music, and could only distinguish whether something sounded good or bad. Faced with impressive techniques, the only evaluation he could really offer was the simplest and most direct kind of praise. Eleonora's performance sounded quite nice. It was simply pleasant to listen to. But it did not give him a soul-stirring feeling. This was the result of diligently raising proficiency. There were no techniques worth showing off, nor any particular emotion poured into it. It was simply the product of hard work making up for lack of talent. When the piece ended, the blonde girl looked at him with violet eyes, holding her bow as though it were a teacher's pointer. Now do you understand? Even with my level, I can't even reach the heels of the court musicians. I'm only about 1/10 as good as they are. You've only studied for 4 days. You probably haven't even mastered the posture yet. I advise you to give up on this idea, and switch to another plan. 1/10, huh? Rayleigh was somewhat surprised. If that was the case, then this was more than enough. Or rather, if court musicians were only at that level, then he was already far above them. Can I try? Rayleigh pointed at the violin in the girl's hand. The moment Eleonora heard that, she knew he still had not given up. So, in order to make him abandon the idea, she directly pushed the violin into his hands. Rayleigh accepted the violin. Unlike Eleonora, he did not stand. He simply sat there casually, placed the bow against the strings, and began to play. In an instant, Eleonora's eyes widened. She looked at the man before her, and could no longer look away. This melody. So precise. Yet within that precision, it was so stirring. 4 days? Don't joke with me. This was clearly master-level skill. As Rayleigh controlled the violin in his hand, he could feel the effect of his skill. Jif blessing, minor in just 4 days, he had already obtained technique surpassing that of court musicians. And his progress in painting was even faster. With these two artistic skills, he had needed only 4 days to reach a realm ordinary people could never attain in their entire lives. And this was not even the complete form of Althea's skill, yet it already possessed this level of strength. What an insane skill I have. Rayleigh quietly sighed. Unfortunately, the princess beside him heard it, and her face immediately filled with black lines. Who praises themselves like that? Well, it really is amazing, assuming what you said is true. 4 days. No matter how she thought about it, that was impossible. This was not learning ability that could be described with a word like genius. It was simply monstrous. Rayleigh, who had no idea how to explain, chose silence. He picked up the sheet music Eleonora had studied before and memorized the pieces, enriching his own stock. If the banquet went on for too long, the number of pieces he knew might not be enough. After the sunset, in the corridor leading to the banquet hall, Eleonora had changed into a formal dress, and looked extremely elegant. She looked at Rayleigh, who was still wearing his mask, and asked with a strange expression. You're not planning to go in like that, are you? Even I can't bring someone that's suspicious into the venue. Rayleigh paused. She meant the mask. Because it was something constructed from Ryuryoku, he felt nothing at all while wearing it. After getting used to the narrow field of vision, he had almost forgotten the mask was even there. He raised a hand, grabbed the mask on his face, and pulled it off. The eerie mask immediately broke apart into erasure and scattered away. His disguised appearance was revealed beneath it. When Eleonora saw that beneath the mask was the face of a white-haired boy who did not look much older than herself, her eyes widened, and her throat went dry. For a moment she could not make a sound. What is it? Eleonora fell into conflicted silence. This guy couldn't possibly be younger than her, could he? She had been treating him with quite a bit of respect earlier. But the moment she realized he might be younger than her, she felt as though she had been tricked. Why was that? Ha, forget it. It's nothing, let's go in. Thank you. Rayleigh knew that if not for her promise to him, the girl probably would not have attended this banquet that caused her so much pain. Because of what had happened during the day, appearing here now should be deeply tormenting for her. Even so, she had honored their agreement. The two stepped into the banquet hall together. Almost instantly, the gazes of most of the people present gathered on them. Rayleigh could feel the girl beside him go completely tense. Chapter 150, Chapter 150, Musician 1257 words. The princess, who should have been the central figure of the banquet, received no welcome at all when she arrived. Instead, people looked at her with mocking gazes. I want to run away from here right now. Run beyond the kingdom. Eleonora secretly encouraged herself, enduring those unpleasant stares, as she walked into the banquet hall with elegant steps. Rayleigh followed behind her. With his current identity, he could not walk beside the girl, or ahead of her in this sort of setting. Well, if it isn't Her Highness the Princess. During the day, you seemed rather unwell at the end. Are you certain it's all right for you to attend the banquet like this? Rayleigh watched from the side as the girl dealt with those important people, while calmly sweeping his gaze across the venue in search of the figure he wanted to find. The goddess with the eyes of Leo. Her overly eye-catching figure stood out brilliantly even in a place like this. Suddenly, Rayleigh heard someone ask the princess, and this gentleman is. Following the explanation they had prepared in advance, Eleonora answered, he is a highly accomplished master of music. A master of music. Those people did not even bother hiding the contempt in their hearts. After all, they had never seen such a young master musician, who looked not even 20 years old. Seeing this, Rayleigh introduced himself. My lords, I am a bard who has traveled through many nations. Music is only one of my talents. I am also highly skilled in painting. Tonight, I have come to perform for you all. Traveled through many nations. How many countries have you been to? An arrogant-looking noble asked as Rayleigh smiled faintly. Then he answered, 72. That noble coughed as though he had choked. Most of the red wine in his mouth sprayed out. He had originally thought this brat would give a single-digit number. He had not expected 72. What do you think this place is? Don't just run your mouth here. How old are you? How could you possibly have traveled to that many countries? Clearly, the noble did not believe Rayleigh's nonsense. That was only natural. After all, convenient transportation had not yet become widespread in this world. Even if there were great ships that could travel across deserts, fortresses that soared through the skies, or battleships so advanced even the gods were amazed by them, such technology was not commonly available. It's only natural for you to have such doubts, my lord. In truth, one of my ancestors was an elf, and both my parents carried half-elven blood. Although by my generation only 1/8 of it remains, theoretically speaking, my lifespan still exceeds 600 years. Rayleigh was lying shamelessly, and without restraint. Even Eleonora, standing beside him, stared at him in shock. She could not tell whether Rayleigh was telling the truth or not, because somehow, it actually sounded plausible. 1/8 elven blood. It felt strange, yet she could not find any obvious flaw on it. The arrogant noble's head was also full of question marks. This had already entered a blind spot in his knowledge. But for the sake of his dignity, he did not want to show that he did not understand. Oh, so that's how it is. Then go ahead and perform. Actually, I once saw someone with 1/8 elven blood perform as well. Right, what instrument will you be playing? The piano, my lord. The 1/8 elf I saw before also performed on the piano. I even exchanged my thoughts on music with him. Rayleigh smiled pleasantly, and Eleonora felt a chill run down her spine. He was definitely messing with that old man. And he was enjoying it. Soon, Rayleigh was brought over to the piano. In order to watch someone with 1/8 elven blood perform, the noble dismissed the court musician, who had just finished preparing with a single sentence. That was beyond Rayleigh's expectations. For a moment, even that greasy, fat face seemed a little adorable. Rayleigh placed his hands on the keys. In that instant, it was as though he had become one with the piano. That natural atmosphere. The arrogant fat noble was immediately convinced the moment he saw it. He was absolutely an expert in music. Although his posture was far from standard and looked almost amateurish, the completely natural feeling made every imperfection seem deliberate. He was definitely a master. Rayleigh quickly searched through the sheet music in his mind, but no matter which piece he chose, something felt slightly lacking. Although this was only a disguise, Rayleigh had still developed an interest in performing, and wanted to enjoy himself properly while he had the chance. A melody surfaced in his mind. It stirred memories from his previous life. With the talent granted by his skill, he discovered that he could actually recall every note. As though guided by sudden inspiration, Rayleigh's fingers began to play naturally. The undead overture, The Dawn, began. A grand musical style. A gradually rising rhythm. An epic feeling rushed toward everyone in the hall. For a time, the entire banquet hall was enveloped by that pressure. Some people were even so stimulated that their blood seemed to flow faster, the hairs on their bodies standing on end as their minds went completely blank with excitement. Combined with Rayleigh's self-taught, master-level piano technique, he grew more and more exhilarated as he played. What began as simply reproducing the rhythm from his memory gradually evolved into variations, with alternating speeds and shifts in tempo added in. The banquet, which should have been focused on socializing, had now become as quiet as a concert hall. Everyone was immersed in this magnificent performance. Even Eleonora was stunned. What's happening? Seriously, incredible. When the piece ended, Rayleigh could not help himself and immediately connected it into a game track from the world's greatest game, Persona 5. A medieval-style feudal kingdom's banquet was single-handedly set ablaze by Rayleigh, turning into something closer to a dance floor. Alquiora, you bastard, what exactly are you thinking? Why were her legs moving on their own? Stop shaking. Since she could not resist it, she might as well enjoy herself. Rayleigh played 5 pieces in a row before finally remembering that he had made absolutely no progress on his actual objective. Only then did he stand, bow to the people in the banquet hall, and withdraw from the performance seat. The court musician who had previously been removed was brought back in with a bewildered expression. Only this time, his performance kept drawing waves of boos from the audience below. You're quite something. The first person to approach Rayleigh after he left the performance area immediately gave him a headache. It was Ares. Rayleigh placed a hand over his chest and greeted him. Good evening, Lord Ares, god of war. Oh, evening. I'm very well, truly well, and extremely happy. I didn't think the lower world had such an outstanding musician. Compared to Apollo's drowsy music, your pieces truly stirred my blood. They made me want to start a war and fight a grand battle immediately. The corners of Rayleigh's mouth lifted slightly. This was the power of music born from gaming, esports, and blood-pumping battle BGM. Read 30 chapters ahead and support me on Patreon. com/Nobia Translator. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.